Hopefully, everyone's had some time to enter in the chat, the bell ringer for today. What do you know about Congress? Yes, a majority vote in most cases, especially in the House, is needed to pass laws. Congress has two parts, yes, the House and the Senate. And it is bicameral, which is what that means, two parts. If it only had one House, it would be unicameral. So the next thing is the government for reading, and you can see it in the module. The government for module should be at the top, and it is the second item underneath the daily lessons. And if you look at the government for reading, it's similar to the other formats. If you just click on that copy, one should open up for you. And when it opens up, it should have made you a copy. If it didn't, please make sure that you do so. And this goes over the different parts of Congress. It starts off with the basics, including qualifications and what it says in the Constitution, but then moves on to powers and responsibilities of Congress, and then finishes by talking about state legislatures. And so this goes along with particular chapters in the textbook. So you would once again type one main idea for each paragraph on the right hand side for each of those sections, and please note you only read what it says. So for instance, the first thing is terms and sessions, page 263 to 265, and then the next one is on 267, so you skip over a page to move on to the next item. And then on the left-hand side, type one thought, comment, or question for each section on the left. Don't forget to do that. Some people forget when they turn in the assignment. And for the rest of the day, when about 25 minutes or so have gone by, we'll take some notes on the basics of Congress, and then you'll have some time to continue working on the reading after that. Does anyone have any questions? No? All right. So go ahead and use the time wisely to work on the government for reading on the legislative branch.
What's the topic of this one?
So once again, in the modules, you can see it says government for notes. If we go ahead and click on that, you will see the page open up, and it has a copy of the notes that we'll take and also the notes page. And if you just click on that, it should make a copy for you. And you can enter in the pertinent information at the top. Of course, this is unit number 4, and the topic is the legislative branch. So type significant things on the right and 2 to 3 comments or questions on the left. So just to start with, the legislative branch, of course, is talking about Congress, and that all comes from Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution. So each one of those first 3 articles is about a different branch. The first is about Congress, second is about the executive branch and the president, third is about the judicial branch and the Supreme Court. The first one talks about the legislative branch, and the United States Congress has some specific powers. And some of the big ones include declaring war, making money, establishing the military, taxing, of course, and borrowing money. Then, of course, there's also one power that they're given in particular because the previous Congress didn't have, and that would be the commerce power. Yes?
Did they share the declaring war power with the executive branch?
No. So, commerce power, which is power over trade, that's something that the Continental Congress lacked. Congress also has the power to punish its own members. So every so many years, depending upon which house, the people can, of course, boot someone out of office. But in the meantime, only Congress has the power to punish its own members. And then it has something called oversight. 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 This means that they basically have the job of inspecting or auditing, watching over the executive branch. So often you'll see committee hearings where members of the cabinet or other executive branch members will come in and answer questions and provide evidence and so on. And of course, the most important thing that Congress does is it makes the law. It makes the law.
And public policies? No, it's not what laws are.
And of course, they're the ones that get the final say on making new citizens and states. New citizens and states. And just to point out, the members of Congress that represent Titusville area, up here on the screen on the left at the top is Senator Bob Casey. And then on the right is Senator Pat Toomey. And then down below, a little bit smaller, would be the two House members that represent Titusville Area School District. The guy on the left only represents Crawford County. So if you live in Crawford County, like Titusville or Hydetown or Centerville, then you're represented by Mike Kelly. And then if you live in Venango or Warren counties, you're represented by the guy on the right, Glenn Thompson. Now let's talk specifically about the House of Representatives, where Glenn Thompson and Mike Kelly sit. A House is elected every 2 years. So every 2 years, Mike Kelly and Glenn Thompson have to run for re-election. The number of representatives that each state gets is based upon the census, the count of the population every 10 years. So every 10 years, 2000, 2010, 2020, and so on, an official census or counting the population is taken, and then the state, obviously, with the greatest population gets the most representatives, and then every state gets at least one. So states like Wyoming and Alaska get one, and then, of course, California has over 50. These are all elected every 2 years, And each district represents roughly the same population. So most of the states, most of the districts, there's a few oddballs, but most of them have between 700 and 800,000 people in each of the districts. All bills involving raising money have to start in the House of Representatives. And the reason why the Founding Fathers gave them that power is because they believed, since that money was coming from the people should have the greatest say on hiring and firing these people. So they get to do that every 2 years. So bills raising money must start in the House of Representatives. And one other specific power of the House is that they get to impeach officials, which just means to charge them. If you're impeached, that does not mean that you're found guilty. It just means that you've been charged. And that's just done with a simple majority vote. Speaking of a majority, the total number of House members right now is 435. And so, in order to get a majority to vote for impeachment or to pass a bill or to hold the leadership positions, a party must have 218 votes altogether. Yes.
435?
435, yes. And 218 seats is a majority. And then next is the Senate. Originally, the Senate was a little bit different. It was originally chosen by the state legislatures. And that's important to remember because the Senate is supposed to represent each of the states kind of like they're their own little countries, and they equally get to have 2 senators per state. So everybody gets an equal say, even if you only have 500,000 people living in your state or 34 million. You each get 2 senators. And so they're originally chosen by the state legislatures. The problem is that some of the state legislatures are part-time. Their members don't get paid a lot. And so in the 19th century, some people discovered if you were wealthy, it was very easy to buy off the entire state legislature. And so you got to pick the senators yourself. And so because of some of that corruption, the 17th Amendment was passed, allowing the senators to be chosen by the voters. So the 17th Amendment changed it so the people vote for their senators. Senators have 6-year terms. That way, they don't have to be as emotional and quick as the public wants. And that might sound like a bad thing. Well, don't we want them to respond to what the public wants? So remember, the Founding Fathers didn't necessarily trust the average person. They thought that people were too emotional and made too quick judgments. And so they believed it was necessary to have a slower paced body like the Senate to try to cool things down and not react to things emotionally. Also helping to keep them distanced from the people, only 1/3 of the Senate is up for election at a time. So a third of them were up for election in 2020, another third will be in 2022, and then the last third of them will be up in 2024. And so both of our senators, Bob Casey and Pat Toomey, they are elected in different classes, they say, in different thirds. Toomey's term is up in 2022, and he has decided not to run for re-election.
Still governor?
Yes. One of the most important things that the Senate does is it gives advice and consent to the president. Advice and consent. And it does this for all kinds of things. Hiring cabinet officials, military officers, signing treaties, ambassadors, and appointing federal judges. So all of these things, the Senate must give its advice and consent. And they're the ones that get to try impeachments. They get to hold trials for impeachments. But in order to convict, there must be a 2/3 vote, which currently means it would be 66.666 senators. And since they're not going to cut one of them into bits, they have to have 67 votes in order to convict. Now, all this could change, of course, if they added states. Obviously, that increases the size of the Senate. So if Puerto Rico became a state, then there would be 2 more added on.
I'll ask later.
The leadership a lot of how both of these are structured and who leads them is the same, but there are just a couple of differences. The person in charge of the House of Representatives is called the Speaker of the House. And they're elected by a majority vote. So obviously whichever party has the most seats is going to select the Speaker. So currently the Democrats hold a majority, and so the Speaker is Nancy Pelosi. And it's actually named in the Constitution. It says in Article 1, the House shall choose their own speaker. So that's something that has existed since the beginning. And the Senate, constitutionally, is led by the Vice President. So the Vice President is also the President of the Senate. So when the Vice President is in the Senate chambers, they are actually referred to as Mr. or Madam President. Now, obviously, the vice president, especially the last few, have been included more in decision making, so they don't always have time to be there. So instead, the Senate also chooses what is called a president pro tempore, which is spelled president, and then the second word is pro, P-R-O, and then the third word is T-E-M-P-O-R-E. Which simply means temporary president. So they take over when the vice president can't be there. They're usually the oldest member of the Senate, or one of the oldest members. For the rest of the leadership, it's basically the same in both the House and the Senate. Both parties elect a leader. And so in the House, there's a Republican leader and a Democratic leader. And in the Senate, there's the same thing, a Republican leader and a Democratic leader. Sometimes they're also referred to, based on how many seats they have, the majority or the minority. So right now, for instance, in the House, the Democrats have a majority. They're called both the Democratic leader and the majority leader. Assisting them are called whips, W-H-I-P-S. Whips. Whips make sure that people within the party vote the same way.
Seems like a word.
Yes, and of course they have limited ability to do that. If someone's really popular with their constituents, the party isn't going to be able to force them to vote in any way. But if they live in a really tight district where they just win election by a small percentage, they obviously need the party's help and its money, and so they're going to more likely vote whatever way the party wants. So that's just the basic leadership that exists, and that actually takes place in both houses. So for the remainder of the period, you can have some time to work on the reading. All the other assignments for the unit are already posted, and you can also go through the daily lessons and look at the other things we'll do for the remainder of the week.